December 25th, 1991. The red Soviet flag over the Kremlin is lowered for the last time. The Cold War is over. But what if that flag never came down? What if a single vote in Moscow changed everything and the Soviet Union survived into the 21st century? First, the map of Europe looks completely different. There is no NATO expansion. Poland, Hungary, and the Baltic states remain locked behind a modern Iron Curtain. Berlin might still be divided by a concrete wall. Instead of a globalized economy, we have two completely separate worlds. The tech boom of the 90s happens, but not like we know it. The Soviets build their own version of the internet. It is heavily monitored, completely isolated, and used for state control. Your smartphone is either American or Soviet. There is no middle ground. The space race never ended either. Instead of cooperating on the International Space Station, the US and the Soviets fight for military dominance in orbit. By 2010, both nations have permanent armed bases on the moon. But the biggest difference is the tension. A second Cold War. 5 generations of kids growing up with nuclear drills in school. The threat of total destruction is not a history lesson. It is a daily reality. The global economy is fractured. Travel is restricted. A simple vacation across the border requires years of government clearance. We traded a messy, unpredictable world for a frozen, terrified one. The Soviet Union did not collapse, and the world never learned how to breathe. August 19th, 1991. 8 men in Moscow decided to change history. In our timeline, they failed. Boris Yeltsin stood on a tank. The Soviet Union collapsed, and the Cold War ended. But what if they succeeded? What if the military actually followed their orders? It only took one phone call to change everything. General Pavel Grachev, head of the elite airborne forces, got a direct line from the Kremlin. In our world, he hesitated. In this world, he said yes. Before the sun rose, elite paratroopers secured every bridge, radio station, and government building in Moscow. When Boris Yeltsin arrived at the Russian parliament to rally the crowd, his path was blocked. No tanks for him to climb. No cameras to broadcast his defiance to the world. By noon, Yeltsin was quietly placed under house arrest in a suburban dacha. The resistance ended before it even started. Moscow fell silent under a strict curfew, but the coup leaders knew they could not just rule by fear. The Soviet economy was broken. People were waiting in bread lines for hours. If the new government did not fix the food supply, they would face a massive revolution. So they made a deal with Mikhail Gorbachev. He remained the president, but only as a puppet. The real power went to a new National Stability Council. They did something the old communists hated. They copied China. Private shops were suddenly allowed to open. Small businesses flourished. Foreign companies were invited to build factories, but only under tight government supervision. They kept the political control, but freed the economy. Keep your own taxes, run your own schools, but Moscow keeps the army and the oil. Most republics signed the new treaty. The Soviet Union did not collapse. It evolved. By 1995, the red flag still flew over the Kremlin. The shops were full of goods, but the KGB still watched every corner. One evening, an old woman stood in Red Square with her grandson. The boy asked if things would ever change. Imagine waking up in 1992 and the Soviet Union never collapsed. There were no headlines about 15 new countries. No maps changed. The Cold War just kept going. Across Europe, military planners who spent 40 years preparing for a massive war suddenly had no idea what to do. In Brussels, NATO leaders held emergency meetings in panic. They thought they would get to declare victory. Instead, they got a giant question mark. The Iron Curtain became invisible, but it never actually went away. Poland, Hungary, and Czechoslovakia still wanted to join the West. But now, every negotiation was incredibly slow. Moscow stopped using threats. They started using trade deals and cheap gas. The Kremlin realized that buying friends lasts longer than bullying them. Inside Russia, things changed fast. A new generation grew up. They remembered the empty shelves of the 80s, but now they saw private shops on the streets. Foreign money built new factories. The government was still a strict dictatorship, but life felt a little more open. Across the ocean, America had to change its entire game plan. The US was the top economy, but they were no longer the only superpower. Every new tech breakthrough became a race. Every military exercise carried a massive risk of starting a nuclear war. The space race started up again, but this time it was about survival. US engineers built reusable shuttles, while Soviet scientists launched massive space stations. They watched each other constantly. One launch led to another. Everyone was pushing for the next big breakthrough. But the tension was always there under the surface. Every single satellite launch raised the same question. How long can this balance actually last? Think about a cafe in Berlin in the late 90s. An old man and his grandson are looking at the Brandenburg Gate. Break time 4. The boy asks if there were really two Germanys once. The old man smiled sadly. In our history, yes. The boy frowned. But not anymore. The grandfather looked toward the checkpoints that still stood nearby. They never truly became one. The child fell silent. For him, a divided Europe was simply normal. Meanwhile, technology companies faced an unusual challenge. Instead of one global market, there were two: Western standards, Eastern standards. Different operating systems, different communication networks, different manufacturing regulations. Products were often redesigned twice, one version for each side of the world. The global economy continued to grow, but more slowly. Cooperation existed. Trust remained limited. As night fell over the earth, the lights turned on in New York, Moscow, and Berlin. Each city represented a completely different version of the future. None knew which path history would ultimately choose. The camera slowly rose into space. Below, the planet appeared peaceful, yet invisible lines still divided continents. The Cold War had never become a hot war, but neither had it truly ended. Humanly, we just moved into a new century, still living between two competing worlds. The year was 2005. The world had avoided a massive global war. But peace was not the same as trust. The Soviet Union still stretched across 11 time zones. The United States still led the Western Alliance. Both powers had learned one lesson from the 20th century. A direct war would destroy them both, so the competition changed. It moved from battlefields to laboratories, universities, factories, space centers, artificial intelligence research, quantum computing, energy technology. This new rivalry became a race for innovation. Every scientific breakthrough carried massive geopolitical weight. When American engineers built a revolutionary battery technology, Soviet scientists answered with ultra-efficient nuclear reactors. When Soviet aerospace companies tested reusable orbital vehicles, NASA accelerated its own deep space program. The competition remained fierce, but this time, the greatest weapon was knowledge. The world's brightest students became strategic assets. Governments invested billions into education, mathematics, physics, medicine, computer science. One Soviet minister remarked during a televised speech that the nation that educates its children best will shape the century. Across both sides, parents pushed their kids to become engineers, researchers, doctors, astronauts, inventors. Technology companies adapted to this divided world. There were now two digital ecosystems: Western computers, Eastern computers. Different operating systems, different software, different communication standards. Travelers crossing from one side to the other often carried two laptops, one for each network. Businesses hired specialists fluent in both technological systems. They became known as digital translators. Meanwhile, space became humanity's newest frontier. The moon hosted two research stations, one American, one Soviet. They were separated by only a few kilometers. Scientists occasionally saw one another through powerful telescopes. Official cooperation remained rare. Unofficial curiosity never disappeared. One evening, a Soviet astronaut left a handwritten note near an automated scientific instrument. The next morning, an American crew discovered it. The message contained only one sentence: "The moon belongs to all of us." No signatures, no politics, only a reminder that science often reaches beyond ideology. Back on Earth, the Olympics carried greater significance than ever. Every medal became symbolic. Every world record reflected national prestige. Chess championships drew global audiences. Scientific competitions attracted television coverage. Even high school mathematics contests became international events. One afternoon, inside a university in Moscow, a professor addressed his students. He told them to never fear competition, only fear complacency. Across the ocean, an American professor unknowingly spoke almost identical words. Neither man had ever met. Yet, both understood the same truth. Progress accelerates when someone else is trying just as hard. As the camera rose above Earth, hundreds of satellites orbited silently. Two independent navigation systems covered the planet. Two rival space stations circled overhead. Two visions of the future competed every single day. The world had remained divided. But instead of destroying civilization, that rivalry had become the engine driving it forward. Two sides, two systems, one ultimate race to see who could build the future first. It was a silent battle of minds, and neither side was willing to lose. Every classroom was a training ground. Every laboratory was a front line. The stakes were no longer about who had the biggest bomb, but who had the smartest citizens. And in that race, there was no finish line. Only the next breakthrough, the next discovery, the next step into the unknown. The world watched, waited, and kept building. By 2015, the world had changed in ways no one in 1991 could have predicted. Artificial intelligence assisted doctors. Quantum computers solved problems once thought impossible. Self-driving vehicles appeared on carefully mapped roads. Cities grew smarter. Factories became almost fully automated. Yet humanity had not built one digital civilization. It had built two: the Western network and the Eastern network. Both were astonishing. Both were powerful. Neither trusted the other. Travelers crossing from Paris to Moscow noticed the difference immediately. At the border, their phones stopped working. Navigation systems switched standards. Digital payment cards became useless. Even satellite positioning changed. The world had two technological languages, each speaking to half the planet. Businesses had to adapt. International corporations employed thousands of specialists simply to bridge this massive technological divide. Entire office towers were dedicated to converting software, security protocols, and communication systems from one network to the other. These specialists became known as digital diplomats. They rarely appeared on television, but without them, global trade would have slowed to a crawl. Meanwhile, artificial intelligence developed along two very different philosophies. In the West, AI emphasized speed, automation, consumer services, and personal productivity. In the East, AI focused on infrastructure, scientific research, transportation, and energy management. Neither approach proved superior. Each reflected different priorities. Competition pushed both sides to improve. Healthcare advanced rapidly. Hospitals in Stockholm performed robotic surgery with incredible precision. Hospitals in Novosibirsk pioneered AI-assisted cancer detection. Eventually, medical conferences became one of the few places where both blocs openly exchanged knowledge. Some discoveries were simply too important to keep secret. One Soviet physician quietly remarked, "Disease has no ideology." The room applauded. Energy became another battlefield. Western nations invested heavily in renewable technologies. The Soviet Union perfected compact, next-generation nuclear reactors. Instead of fighting over oil, the superpowers competed to build cleaner and more reliable energy systems. The winner would not control the world through weapons, but through electricity. One afternoon, inside an international technology exhibition in neutral Switzerland, visitors walked through two enormous halls. One displayed Western innovations. The other showcased Eastern achievements. A young engineer stood between them, unable to decide which side impressed him more. An elderly inventor approached and smiled. "You do not have to choose," the old man said. The engineer looked surprised. "Why not?" The old man answered quietly, "Because every invention belongs to tomorrow." Outside, children played with educational robots. Driverless buses moved silently through city streets. Maglev trains crossed continents at extraordinary speeds. Technology flourished everywhere. Yet one invisible wall still divided humanity. Not concrete, not barbed wire. Compatibility. As evening settled across Europe, a passenger boarded a train in Berlin. He carried 2 passports. He carried 2 digital identity cards. He carried 2 communication devices. The border no longer felt impossible. It only felt inconvenient. Perhaps that was progress too. Far above, Earth rotated beneath countless satellites. 2 independent constellations illuminated the night sky. Competing, watching, advancing. Humanity had built 2 extraordinary futures, still hoping that one day they might become one. It was 2022. The Cold War was not fought by soldiers. It was lived every single day. In New York, a college student started her morning by checking the Western Global Network. She went to lectures in virtual classrooms, ordered groceries through self-driving delivery systems, and paid with a digital ID recognized across the West. Life felt effortless. Thousands of miles away in Novosibirsk, an engineering student started his day differently. His school used the Eastern Scientific Grid. His artificial intelligence tutor spoke 6 languages. His labs connected directly to research hubs across the Soviet Union. Students worked with scientists in Moscow, Kyiv, Almaty, and Vladivostok. Both students lived in highly advanced societies, yet neither could easily access the other's digital world. Their search engines were different. Their software was different. Even their online maps showed the world through different standards. Neither system was completely closed. Neither was completely open. Each reflected decades of political choices. Travel was possible, but it was complicated. A businesswoman flying from Paris to Moscow packed 2 smartphones, 2 payment cards, and 2 digital ID credentials. Before boarding, she downloaded special compatibility software onto a secure travel device. Crossing the border did not just mean changing cash anymore. It meant changing entire digital ecosystems. Children grew up accepting this as normal. A 10-year-old boy once asked his father why they had 2 internets. His father smiled and told him they did not. He said they had 2 worlds that learned to connect differently. The boy thought for a moment and asked if they would ever become one. His father looked out the train window and said he hoped so. Across both sides, culture remained surprisingly vibrant. Western musicians packed stadiums in London. Eastern orchestras played to sold-out crowds in Moscow. International film festivals became rare moments where artists from both worlds met freely. Sports united people more easily than politics. The Olympic Games became the one event where billions watched together. This was not because rivalry disappeared, but because respect survived the competition. Meanwhile, families adapted to the divided world. Grandparents mailed handwritten letters across borders. Students waited days for international academic approvals. Scientists celebrated every new cooperation agreement. Neither spoke the other's language fluently, but mathematics required no translation. Hours later, they were solving engineering problems together. Watching quietly from across the room, an elderly judge smiled. "This," he whispered, "is how the Cold War finally ends." No treaty had been signed. No speeches had been given. Only 2 curious minds working together. As evening settled across Earth, millions of people returned home from work. Children finished their homework. Parents prepared dinner. Neighbors greeted one another. Life continued. There were different flags, different systems, and different governments. Yet the hopes of ordinary people looked remarkably similar. The camera slowly rose above the planet. Borders faded. Political maps disappeared. Only cities remained. Bright lights scattered across one shared world. A reminder that humanity often has far more in common than history allows it to see. No matter how many walls are built, people always find a way to reach across them. The digital divide seemed permanent, but the human connection was stronger. Every day, in small ways, people bypassed the systems to find each other. It was not a revolution of weapons, but a quiet daily effort to stay connected. That is the real story of how people survived a divided century. They did not let the borders define their minds. They kept looking for ways to build bridges, even when the maps told them it was impossible. In the end, the 2 worlds were always just one planet. It is the year 2026, but not our 2026. 35 years ago, the Soviet Union did not collapse. They chose reform instead. The Cold War never ended. It just changed. The world is not split by concrete walls anymore. It is split by competing systems. From space, Earth looks calm. Cities are incredibly bright. Fast maglev trains cross whole continents. Reusable rockets launch every single week. Artificial intelligence helps billions of people. Tech has reached levels we can barely imagine. But under that shiny surface, two massive powers still run the world. Washington and Moscow. Still rivals. Still completely necessary to the global order. The Soviet Union is now a massive federal union across Eurasia. Their economy mixes state planning with strictly watched private business. Their schools turn out top-tier engineers. Their space program runs permanent bases on the moon. Across the ocean, the United States leads the Western Alliance. American companies rule consumer tech. They lead in medicine. They lead in entertainment. They dominate private space travel. Neither side won, neither side lost. Instead, they forced each other to get better. The biggest rivalry in history became the biggest engine for human progress. Every single breakthrough gets an instant answer. Fusion energy, quantum computers, deep space travel. The race never stops. But something strange happened along the way. Kids born after the year 2000 do not know the old fear. They do not remember the threat of nuclear war. To them, this rivalry is just normal life. It is a permanent game. It is like two elite athletes pushing each other to break world records. One spring morning in Geneva, people from both sides meet. This meeting is different. They are not there to talk about peace. They already have peace. They are there to plan a joint mission to Jupiter moon, Europa. Scientists from the East and West sit at the same table. They look at maps, they study models, they read papers. For hours, nobody talks about politics. An old diplomat watches them from the corner of the room. He smiles. After decades of fighting, humanity figured something out. Some goals are just too big for one country. Months later, the biggest spaceship ever built leaves Earth orbit. The crew has Americans, it has Russians, it has Ukrainians, it has Kazakhs, it has Canadians, it has French and Japanese crew members, all wearing different flags, all carrying the same mission. As V-engines ignite, Mission Control in Houston and Moscow count down together. For the first time, two rival superpowers launch one shared dream. Billions of people watch the live stream back home. Some root for the West, some root for the Soviets. Most just root for the crew. The camera pulls back from the ship. Break time 2 seconds. Earth gets smaller and smaller. A tiny blue dot. Break time 2 seconds. It looks fragile. It looks borderless. From out there, you cannot see politics. You cannot see alliances. You cannot see rivalries. You only see one home. Still looking for answers. Still learning. Still pushing into the dark. Maybe that was the real point all along. Not beating each other, but finding out what is out there together. Some empires disappear. Others transform. The Soviet Union was one of the most powerful states in modern history. Its achievements were extraordinary. Its failures were profound. Its legacy still shapes the world we live in today. In our history, the Soviet Union dissolved in 1991. 15 independent countries emerged. The Cold War came to an end. The decades that followed brought new opportunities, new conflicts, and a very different international order. Tonight, we imagined another possibility. A Soviet Union that survived. Not unchanged, but reformed. We imagined a world where rivalry continued, where two superpowers competed not only with armies, but with science, technology, education, and space exploration. Could history really have unfolded this way? No one knows. History rarely follows a single inevitable path. It is shaped by countless decisions. Some made by presidents, some by generals, some by ordinary people whose names history never records. Perhaps that is the greatest lesson hidden within this timeline. Competition can inspire remarkable progress, but cooperation determines how far that progress ultimately reaches. Inside the Museum of the Cold War, the final visitors quietly leave. The lights begin to dim. Only one exhibit remains illuminated. Behind crystal glass, two flags stand side by side. The Stars and Stripes and the Soviet flag. Neither above the other. Both preserved as symbols of an era that shaped generations. A young boy asks his mother, "Were they always enemies?" She kneels beside him. "No," she says, "they were rivals. Sometimes rivals argue, sometimes they compete, and sometimes they help each other become better." The boy looks at the two flags once more, then quietly nods. Outside, snow begins falling over Geneva. Diplomats leave an international conference. Scientists board evening trains. Students from different nations laugh together in cafes. Life continues, not because every disagreement has disappeared, but because humanity has learned that disagreement does not have to become destruction. The camera slowly rises above Europe, then higher, above Asia, above North America. The continents glow beneath the night sky. From space, no borders are visible. No alliances, no ideologies. Only one fragile planet, carrying billions of people who all share the same future. Ancient parchment begins turning. One page, then another. The final page closes. A bronze seal is pressed into warm red wax. The emblem of the hidden archives appears. The archive is complete. Tonight, we imagined a world where the Soviet Union never collapsed. Tomorrow, another forgotten possibility waits to be explored. Because history is not only the story of what happened, it is also the story of every future that almost existed. We often think of history as set in stone, but every choice we make splits the path. What if the next split happens tomorrow? What if the choices we make right now are the ones that future generations will look back on and wonder about? The archives are vast, and the stories are endless. There are thousands of roads we never walked, thousands of decisions that could have changed everything. We will explore them all, one archive at a time. Sleep well, and keep your eyes on the horizon.